The morning my granddaughter came to the door with a split lip and dried tears on her cheeks, I was sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I hadn't heard the car pull up. I hadn't heard the gate open. I only heard the knock, 3 quiet, hesitant knocks, like she wasn't sure she deserved to be let in. I set down my mug and walked to the front door, and when I opened it and saw her standing there, her jacket pulled tight around her shoulders, even though it was 62 degrees outside, something shifted in my chest. Not broke, shifted, like a gear finding its teeth. "Grandpa," she said. That was all. I held the door open and she came inside. Her name is Lily. She is 29 years old, and she has her grandmother's eyes green-gray, the kind that change color with the light. Her grandmother passed 6 years ago, and sometimes when I look at Lily straight on, I have to remind myself to breathe. She sat down at my kitchen table and wrapped both hands around the mug of fresh coffee I put in front of her, and she didn't say anything for a long time. I didn't push. I've learned, in 64 years of living, that silence is not the enemy. Silence is where the truth comes to rest before it finds words. Finally, she looked up at me and said, "I don't know what to do anymore." I sat down across from her. "Tell me from the beginning," I said. So she did. My daughter's name is Carol. She married a good man named Dennis 27 years ago, and they built a decent life in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. A brick house, 2 cars, a vegetable garden in the back that Carol tends like it owes her something. They had Lily, and then 3 years later they had my grandson Marcus. And I watched those 2 children grow up at holiday dinners and summer visits and school plays I drove 4 hours to attend. I was not an absent grandfather. I want to be clear about that. Lily married her husband. I will call him my son-in-law, because that is what he is, whatever else he may be 3 years ago. His name is Raymond. Raymond is 33 years old and works in sales for a medical device company. He is the kind of man who shakes your hand too hard the first time he meets you and spends the rest of the evening making sure you know exactly how much money he makes. I noticed that about him at Thanksgiving the year before the wedding. I filed it away. His mother's name is Patrice. I need you to understand something about Patrice before I continue, because she is the center of everything that happened. Patrice is 61 years old. She lives 40 minutes from Raymond and Lily's house, and she uses that proximity like a weapon. She drops by without calling. She gives decorating opinions that are actually instructions. She has opinions about how Lily loads the dishwasher, how Lily styles her hair, how Lily speaks to her husband in public. She expressed all of these opinions freely, regularly, and with a smile on her face that never quite reached her eyes. Lily had been tolerating this for 3 years. She told me bits and pieces over phone calls, a comment here, a slight there. I listened. I asked questions. I told her she needed to talk to Raymond. She said she had. She said Raymond told her his mother meant well, that she just had a strong personality, that Lily needed to be more patient. What Lily did not tell me, until that morning at my kitchen table, was how bad it had actually gotten. It started escalating, she said, about 8 months before she showed up at my door. Patrice had begun making comments about children specifically, about why Lily and Raymond didn't have any yet. Not gentle nudges, pointed remarks. At dinners, at family gatherings, once in the middle of a grocery store when she ran into Lily by accident. "A woman your age," she said once, "doesn't have the luxury of waiting." Lily was 28 years old. Then came the incident at Easter. Raymond's family does Easter at Patrice's house every year. Patrice cooks for 12 people and expects compliments on every dish. Lily had been going through a difficult few months. She'd had a miscarriage in February that she hadn't told many people about. Not even me. Not yet. She was quiet at dinner. She wasn't eating much. Patrice noticed and made a remark across the table, in front of everyone, about how Lily was wasting away, and maybe that was why she couldn't keep a pregnancy. The table went silent. Raymond said nothing. Lily excused herself and went to the bathroom and cried. Then she came back out and finished the meal, because she didn't know what else to do. When she told me this part, I put my hand on the table, not on her hand, just near it, because I didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. "What did Raymond do after?" I asked. My voice was even. I've had a lot of practice keeping my voice even. "He said she didn't mean it that way," Lily said. "He said I was being sensitive." I picked up my coffee. I set it back down. "Is that when your lip?" I gestured. Lily shook her head. That was last week. Last week had been a Sunday. Raymond's family had gathered at his parents' house, Patrice and her husband Gerald, for Gerald's 65th birthday. Lily had brought a cake she'd baked herself, a lemon cake with cream cheese frosting, because she'd asked Raymond what his father liked, and she'd tried. She'd tried for 3 years. She was still trying. Patrice had looked at the cake when Lily set it on the counter and said, loud enough for the room to hear, "Oh, homemade." The way she said it made homemade sound like a polite word for something worse. Lily didn't respond. She went to help set the table. Later, when they were cutting the cake, Gerald said it was delicious. He meant it. He's always been a decent man, Gerald, quiet, a little checked out, but decent. Patrice watched him say it, and something shifted in her face. She looked at Lily and said, "I hope you didn't use that recipe from the internet. Some of those have so much sugar it's almost irresponsible to serve to an older person." Gerald laughed it off. Raymond was looking at his phone. Lily said quietly, "It's a family recipe. My grandmother's." Patrice said, "Well, just that. Just well." And the way she let the words sit there in the air, heavy and pointed, made everyone in the room feel it. Lily picked up her purse from the counter to put it in the other room. Patrice was standing near the doorway. As Lily passed her, Patrice reached out and grabbed Lily's arm. Not gently. She grabbed it and said, low enough that only Lily could hear, "You are never going to be what my son deserves. I want you to know that I know that, even if he doesn't yet." Lily pulled her arm away. She lost her balance slightly. Patrice had grabbed her near the kitchen door, and when Lily pulled back, she caught the edge of her mouth on the door frame. Not badly. Enough. Raymond drove them home. Lily waited until they were inside the house, and then she told him exactly what his mother had said and exactly what had happened. She showed him the small cut at the corner of her mouth. Raymond said, "She probably didn't mean to grab you that hard." Lily looked at her husband for a long moment. Then she got in her car and drove to my house. 4 hours. She arrived at 6 in the morning. She knocked 3 times like she wasn't sure she deserved to be let in. I listened to all of it. When she finished, I stood up and I poured us both more coffee, and I stood at the kitchen window for a moment, looking out at the yard. The oak tree I planted the year Carol was born was turning orange at the edges. I thought about the first time I held Lily in the hospital. I thought about her grandmother's eyes. Then I turned around and I said, "I need to make a phone call." Lily looked at me. "To who?" "An old colleague," I said. "Don't worry about it right now. Are you hungry?" She stared at me. "Grandpa, I just told you all of that, and you want to know if I'm hungry?" "A person thinks more clearly after breakfast," I said. "Scrambled or fried?" She almost laughed. "Almost. Scrambled," she said. Here's what Lily did not know about me, and what I had never told her, because it never came up, or perhaps because I am, at my core, a private person who learned a long time ago that what you know and what you reveal are two very different instruments. I spent 31 years as a civil litigation attorney. I retired at 62, 2 years before her grandmother passed, because I wanted to be home. I'd spent a career in courtrooms and depositions, and I wanted finally to tend to my own life the way you tend a garden, quietly, patiently, with both hands in the soil. So I retired, and I came home, and I was there when Eleanor got sick, and I was there at the end, and I was there after, and I don't regret a single day of that. But I still know the law, and I still know people. The colleague I called that morning is a woman named Sandra. She and I worked together for 11 years at the same firm, before she went on to become one of the better personal injury and civil harassment attorneys in the state of Ohio. We have stayed in touch. She is sharp, thorough, and has no patience for bullies of any kind. I left her a voicemail at 7:15 in the morning, and she called me back before 8. I walked out to the back porch to take the call so Lily could eat in peace. "Tell me what happened," Sandra said, by way of greeting. I told her. All of it. Methodically, in the order it occurred, with dates where I had them. Sandra asked 4 clarifying questions. Then she was quiet for a moment. "Physical contact without consent," she said. "Intentional infliction of emotional distress. The comments about the miscarriage alone." She paused. "Does your granddaughter have documentation of anything? Messages? Dates? Witnesses?" "I don't know yet," I said, "but I can find out." "Get me documentation," Sandra said, "and get me a timeline. If what you're describing is accurate, we have a civil harassment claim at minimum, possibly more. And the physical contact, even if it seems minor, that's battery. Technically. It's simple assault in Ohio. That's criminal territory. I thanked her and went back inside. Lily was finishing her eggs. She looked up when I came in and I sat across from her and I said, I need to ask you some things. Okay, she said. Has Patrice ever put her hands on you before last week? Lily thought. She grabbed my wrist once, about a year ago, when I was leaving early from Christmas. She grabbed my wrist and said I was being disrespectful to Raymond by wanting to leave. Did anyone see that? Raymond's brother was in the room. His name? Daniel. I wrote that down. I keep a legal pad in the kitchen drawer out of habit. 31 years of habit. Has she ever sent you messages, texts, emails that were threatening or demeaning? Lily looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face before, something between confusion and the very early stages of relief. Yes, she said slowly. A lot of them. I need you to screenshot everything and send it to me, I said. Every message, every voicemail if you have them. I need dates for every incident you can remember, as precisely as you can. I need names of anyone who witnessed anything. Grandpa, she put down her fork. Who did you call? An old colleague, I said again. Someone who can help. What kind of colleague? I looked at my granddaughter across the kitchen table, at her grandmother's eyes in her face, at the small mark at the corner of her mouth. I was an attorney for 31 years, I said. Civil litigation. I retired before your grandmother got sick. The look on her face is something I will carry for the rest of my life. She stared at me. You were a lawyer? I was. For 31 years. Yes. And you never told me? You never asked what I did before I retired, I said, not unkindly. And I don't talk about myself much. Your grandmother always said that was a character flaw. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, What did you do in civil litigation? Among other things, I said, I spent the better part of a decade handling civil harassment cases, restraining orders, intentional infliction of emotional distress, cases where someone decided they had the right to make another person's life unbearable. I paused. I was very good at it. She looked at me for a long time. Why didn't you ever say anything? When I told you about Patrice all those times on the phone, why didn't you tell me then? It was a fair question, and it deserved a fair answer. Because I was waiting to see if Raymond would handle it, I said. It wasn't my place to step in while there was still a chance he would do the right thing. I looked down at my coffee. He didn't. She didn't argue with that. Over the next 3 days, Lily stayed in my spare room and we built the case. That is the only way I know how to describe it. We built it, the way you build anything solid, from the ground up, piece by piece, checking each element before you add the next. She sent me screenshots of text messages going back 2.5 years. I read every one. I organized them by date and category, demeaning comments, physical boundary violations, interference in the marriage, the specific message Patrice had sent the week after the miscarriage, which I will not repeat here, but which made Sandra, when I forwarded it, say, "Oh, we're definitely using this." Lily wrote out a timeline of incidents, handwritten first and then typed. She remembered more than she thought she did. People often do, once they start. The body keeps its own records. She called her friend Vanessa, who had been present at 2 separate incidents, the Christmas wrist grab, which it turned out Vanessa had witnessed partly from the hallway, and a dinner 6 months prior where Patrice had made a comment about Lily's weight in front of 4 other people. Vanessa was willing to provide a written statement. She had, it turned out, been waiting to be asked. Daniel Raymond's brother was harder. I told Lily not to contact him directly. Not yet. We needed to know what side he was on before we showed our hand. That's a lesson that took me years to learn. You don't reveal what you're holding until you know what the other person is willing to do with the information. On the 3rd morning, while Lily was in the shower, I called Raymond. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Is Lily okay?" he said immediately, which told me he had some awareness of what was happening, even if he'd been choosing not to fully face it. "She's safe," I said. "I'm calling because I think it's time for a direct conversation between you and me." There was a pause. "About what?" "About your mother," I said, "and the 3 years of documented harassment she has subjected your wife to, and about what happens next." The silence, on the other end of the phone had a particular quality. I've sat across from a lot of people in difficult conversations. I know the silence of someone realizing the ground has shifted under them. Harassment is a strong word, he said finally. It's also a precise legal term, I said. And I want you to understand that I am using it precisely, not emotionally. Another pause. I didn't know you were. No, I said. You didn't. I want to be clear about what I'm asking of you, Raymond. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm asking you to look at the documentation, and there is substantial documentation, and make a decision about what kind of husband you want to be. That decision affects everything that comes next. What does comes next mean? He said. His voice had changed. The confidence had drained out of it. That depends on you, I said, and on your mother. I told him I would be sending him a summary, not the full file, just a summary by email that evening. I told him he had 72 hours to respond. I told him I hoped we could resolve this without formal legal proceedings, because formal legal proceedings are hard on everyone, but that I was entirely prepared to proceed formally if necessary. Then I said, I love my granddaughter. I've loved her since the moment she was born. I want her to have a good marriage and a good life. I'm telling you this so you understand that what I'm doing because I believe she deserves someone in her corner. I hope that person turns out to be you. I ended the call and went to make coffee. Sandra filed for a civil harassment restraining order 4 days later. The documentation was thorough. The text message after the miscarriage was, as Sandra had predicted, particularly significant. The physical contact incidents, the wrist at Christmas, the grab at Gerald's birthday were documented with Vanessa's statement and Lily's own detailed account. Sandra also flagged the pattern of behavior under Ohio's civil stalking and harassment statutes. Patrice was served at her home on a Thursday afternoon. I know this because Lily called me, and I could hear in her voice something I hadn't heard in a long time. Not happiness exactly, but the release of a held breath. The sound of a person remembering that they are allowed to take up space. Gerald called me that evening. He and I had spoken maybe 6 times in 3 years, mostly at holidays. His voice on the phone was quiet and careful. He said, I think I've known for a while that things had gone too far. I want you to know I'm not defending her. I respected him for that call. It's not easy to make. Raymond had responded to my email within 24 hours of receiving it. His response was long and uncomfortable to read, the response of a man who is confronting things he has been not seeing for a long time, which is a particular kind of painful. He wrote that he was sorry, that he understood, reading the documentation laid out in front of him, that he had failed Lily by not taking her seriously, that he wanted to do better. He wrote, I didn't know you were an attorney. She didn't either. I don't think that changes what we did or didn't do. But I want you to know it's not why I'm responding the way I am. I'm responding this way because when I read it all together, I couldn't pretend anymore. I appreciated that. A man who can say I couldn't pretend anymore is a man who might still find his way. Lily and Raymond had a long series of conversations over the following weeks. I stayed out of them. I had done what I could do. The rest was theirs to navigate. She told me, in pieces over phone calls, that they were seeing a couples therapist, that Raymond had told his mother, in clear terms, that her behavior had consequences, that Patrice, for the first time in 3 years, was being made to understand that her son had a wife, and that his wife was not optional. The restraining order was granted. Patrice was required to have no contact with Lily for 3 years. Violations would be criminal. Sandra did what she always does, thorough, precise, no drama. I sent her a bottle of wine and a handwritten note. She called me to say thank you and said, You know you could still be doing this. I know, I said. I like my garden. She laughed. You always were stubborn. Careful, I said. My granddaughter calls it principled. On a Sunday, about 6 weeks after all of it, Lily drove up to my house again. This time she didn't knock hesitantly. She used her key. I had given her a key years ago, and she came in through the back door while I was in the garden, and she called out, I brought lunch. We ate on the back porch. Turkey sandwiches and chips and lemonade she'd made herself. The oak tree had gone fully orange by then, the leaves just beginning to come down. At some point she put down her sandwich and said, Can I ask you something? You can always ask me something. Why did you wait? She said. When I'd tell you things on the phone, why didn't you step in sooner? I'd been thinking about how I'd answer this question, because I knew it was coming. Because it wasn't mine to solve, I said. You were an adult. Raymond was your husband. The relationship was yours. If I had stepped in the first time you mentioned Patrice making a comment, I would have been substituting my judgment for yours. That's not respect. That's just a different kind of control. She was quiet. But you came to me, I said. When it became too much, you came to me. And that's what mattered. I was here. She looked at me for a moment, and then she said, Grandma would have liked this. You telling me the whole thing. Your grandmother, I said, would have handled it herself, and not told anyone until it was done. Lily laughed. A real laugh, full and unguarded. I haven't heard that laugh in a long time. That's true, she said. The leaves came down around us, and the lemonade was good, and the afternoon was quiet. I thought about what it means to hold something for a long time without using it. 31 years of learning how the law works, how power works, how people work, carrying all of that quietly, mostly invisible, going about an ordinary retired life with a garden and cold coffee on a back porch. There are people who would say, I should have spoken sooner. There are people who would say, I should have stayed out of it entirely. I've made peace with the fact that I can't satisfy both. What I know is this. My granddaughter came to my door at 6 a.m. with her grandmother's eyes and a cut at the corner of her mouth, and she said, I don't know what to do anymore. And I knew what to do. I had always known what to do. I had just been waiting for the moment when knowing was the right response. Lily stayed for dinner that Sunday. I made the chili I've been making since 1987, the one Eleanor always said was too spicy, and then ate 2 bowls of. We sat at the kitchen table until the sun went down, and she told me about the therapist she'd started seeing on her own, separate from the couple's sessions, and about the promotion she was up for at work, and about a weekend trip she and Raymond were taking to the lake. She talked about the future. That's what I noticed. She talked about the future in the present tense, like it was something she was already standing in. When she left, she stopped at the door and turned around and said, You know you're my favorite person, right? I know, I said. Drive safe. She rolled her eyes exactly the way her mother did at that age. Then she got in her car and drove down the street, and I watched the taillights until they turned the corner. I went back to the kitchen and washed the dishes. The oak tree was dark against the evening sky through the window. I thought about calling Sandra to check in, then decided it could wait until morning. I thought about Carol, who I needed to call anyway, who still didn't know the full extent of what had happened. I thought about Eleanor. Then I dried my hands, turned off the kitchen light, and went to sit on the back porch with a cup of coffee, hot this time, and listen to the yard. Some things you carry for 30 years and never need. Some things you carry for 30 years and the moment comes and you know, precisely, that this is what they were for. I am 64 years old. I have buried a wife and retired a career and watched my family grow into people I did not entirely expect, in ways I did not entirely plan. I have made mistakes and I have made good decisions, and I have, on a handful of occasions, made exactly the right call at exactly the right time. That morning, when my granddaughter knocked 3 times on my door like she wasn't sure she deserved to be let in, I opened it. That's all. I opened the door and let her in, and I made her breakfast, and I made a phone call, and I did what I knew how to do. That's the whole story. That's all it ever is.